Hello, everybody. Welcome to the class. Welcome to week 3 of the class, BC4 1810, Shading and Lighting with Blender. That reel, pretty incredible stuff, guys. Thank you, Kate, for putting it together, of course, editing that. And I think we got some thumbs up on the track itself. The music worked really well with the theme. Great choice. Thank you for doing that again. It's definitely a highlight of this stream for me personally. And yeah, man, incredible work this week, guys. The first week was pretty easy in general, but this one kind of stepped up the challenge, and a lot of you guys accepted it and crushed the homework. So all of those vehicle renders in Eevee, very impressive stuff. So we're gonna go look through some of those here in a minute. Yeah, before we get to talking about this week's topic, which is, I just forgot. I forgot what we're talking about. Character lighting, shading and lighting characters in Blender. That's what we're going to talk about. It's a topic near and dear to my heart. Characters have always been like the thing I do. So I am very excited to talk about and unpack like what that looks like from my perspective and my experience. So we're going to get into that. But of course, first we're going to go look at week 2's homework and talk about some of my favorites. Now, going through the reel itself kind of made me realize that I forgot some people. There were a lot of submissions, and along the way, I'm still not done with grading homework. You guys probably know that if you haven't received a grade, I am going to get around to that. I've been kind of losing myself in some of the critiques, and they've kind of been fairly in depth and taking more time maybe than usual. So I'm going to catch up with those, but I along the way, I forgot some people that would totally be in the favorites. Miranda, you would have been there. I just forgot about you, but I loved what you did. I just saw that in the reel and thought about it. But speaking of, we'll get right into some of my favorite vehicles. This one right here from Mahir. What I liked about this one was the frequency of detail in your reflections and how you broke them up with the texture. I got a question from someone, I can't remember who it was, but oh, thanks you, Silent, for telling me it's all green. Good deal. I try and like cut out the asking to make sure it's okay, but sometimes when I have errors, I feel like I need to ask that a bunch until I feel comfortable again. So thank you. But yeah, someone asked in one of their threads, like, they referred back to last week's stream when I said, if I had more time, if this was going on my demo reel, I would add more details to the car. And you were asking, well, what were those details? Like, what was that extra work that you were going to do? And Mahir's example here is what I would have done. It is in that realm. It's breaking up the reflections with a texture. And in this case, it's kind of this wet, like condensated kind of appearance on the car paint. And when you zoom out, that's the kind of breakup that I would want to put into a final, like, detailed render. And also in the wheels themselves, like that fine detail in the bump map, breaking up this rubber from being so uniform across the surface. Like these little touches, the metallic bits, the piping in here, breaking that up with glossy reflection textures, that goes a really long way in making a final high quality, high resolution render, So I really wanted to highlight Mahir for doing that. You did a great job. If I were to critique it slightly, it would be that these patterns are a little too uniform. I would prefer to see them maybe concentrated in certain areas, but like still, it looks really good. I mean, like from this angle right here, I love all the details and how you can see them in the reflections, especially. You're going to see that some of my notes and a lot of my critique notes were on reflections. And of course, yeah, ask questions. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat. As always, trying to answer your questions, so don't hesitate to ask them. All right, so Mahir, good job. That's the first vehicle. Next, we have a few vehicles here from N647. This one was all around just a good render. Like it feels fairly realistic, definitely believable. I love the carbon fiber. I was hoping someone would do that, and you did it, and it looks beautiful, depending on the angle. Well, it looks beautiful in general, but some angles, it really highlights that carbon fiber, and you can see that right here on the right side, and that looks awesome. I like, let's see what else. Oh, I love that you painted something on the front. You put some hand-painted textures going on with that design on the hood. So And then in the interior, you also put various materials to represent the different pieces inside. And so that's going the extra mile when you could have just kind of like I did, put like a broad material on everything, like a broad plastic or a broad rubber or something like that. You didn't. You went in and put details all over the place. So, or materials on various pieces. And so that helps with the detail level. So good stuff there. That was one of my faves. Pavel, everyone knows you at this point. You have inherited like the EV master title because you're helping everybody with their EV questions and you're teaching me things that I didn't know about. So, and it shows in your work too. Like this is a beautiful car render. It looks realistic. I love the volumetrics you've got coming out of the headlights. That's a touch that I don't think I saw too many others, if anybody else do that. So I really like that. And your reflection quality is good. That's a note that came up a lot where, whether it was a kind of a not the greatest choice of HDRI and there wasn't a lot to reflect on the car, or you just use lamps. If there aren't a lot of reflections happening on the vehicle, it starts to look unrealistic or not tangible. Something feels off. It feels kind of flat. And so these examples all have reflections working for them. Pavel, yours is a great example of that. So that's a great choice of HDRI, I think. And also, it just shows off the quality of the car paint. Aaron, I mean, this one, the detail you have both in the reflections, you choose an amazing HDRI. I mean, the reflections are just having a heyday on your car paint, and that looks beautiful. And, like reflections and quality of reflection can make metal look exactly like metal or make it look not like metal at all. Or car paint, the same thing. Reflections just play such a big role in vehicle lighting like this. And so this looks incredible. I really, really like that you put so much effort into the headlights because that's something that I did not even prepare my model. This sports car that I shared out for you guys to use. There's not a lot of detail in the headlight. There's not like a plastic cover. Like that's the main headlight piece. And then there's interior bulbs and the like chrome, pieces that all work together. And in Aaron's example, he put materials on all of those. There's plastic, you can see through it. There's a glow effect, and all of that makes for an extremely realistic, believable effect. So Aaron, you crushed it. I expected no less from you, frankly. You do awesome work. So these are all great. And then a few more. Grady, I really liked your beetle, your bug, because you had the reflections that worked really well. It's showing off on the ground texture. It's showing off in the car paint, and all of that just works. And I focused on this one because at the time, like I saw so many submissions that did not have great reflections. And this is kind of a note that's thumbs up for all of these that you see right now. And the only small critique that I would give to Grady and Ahmed is that the ground plane ends very abruptly, and that's particularly noticeable and kind of disconnects from the environment. So whether you can kind of blur it out with depth of field, that's one option, or just like integrate it better into the overall scene. That would be an improvement, but it's a small one. I like the puddles here in Ahmed's example. The pattern's maybe a little bit noticeably tiled or kind of a uniform pattern, but still I really like the reflectivity difference between the puddles and the non-puddled portion. And then the car, I'm focusing on the puddles, but the car looks really good. It's got what I've been talking about, the right reflections, the right Fresnel effect, and the right amount of glow and stuff like that. So it's really good. And then I wanted to focus on CT Hulison's interior. This is one of the better ones. You've even put a dashboard texture on there. It looks like this kind of like a suede almost on the car door interior. You got nice rubber going on, a very pleasant tan kind of elegant interior. So yeah, that really, really good job there. And your exterior looks awesome as well. I had to save this one for last because Omar absolutely crushed his vehicle. And he's in here. And Omar, I gotta be honest, all these are great. Really, really good. And it's clear that you put a lot of effort into making these look amazing, and it shows. This one right here needs to go on your portfolio or on your demo reel yesterday. This is a stunning image, quite frankly. And I told him I would, and I did. I put it in my Pinterest board for lighting reference, that I go to look at the great artists and how they light, and this one made it in there. I think it is so good. It's such a strong abstract lighting situation that showcases this car model. The fact that you put either a texture or you actually modeled the tread and the tire. I mean, it's next level. And the way you broke up the surface with the texture, that is definitely what I was going to go for. If I was going to have more time with the stream last week, if I was going to put a car render on my demo reel, I would want this type of breakup. It doesn't look like the car is old and beaten up or anything. It just breaks up the reflection in a very realistic way. And it's a subtle effect, but like when you don't have that breakup, it just looks too perfect. The reflections look unnaturally precise in a way. And so breaking it up slightly does wonders in ways that it's hard to really explain until you see it and kind of compare side by side. But I mean, this is awesome work. I really hope you put it on your reel. It's incredible. This image right here it stunned me. It's really, really amazing. But I must say, it is cycles, and you know this, and we talked about it in your thread, but it is not Eevee. I was like super excited when I saw it, thinking like, no way if Eevee can do this. But I think it can. I really think it can. And if you're up for a challenge, Omar, I would love to see you try and recreate as close to this as possible with Eevee. I'm tempted to do it myself. I might do it at some point just because I want to test that theory. But it looks incredible. It looks incredible. You did break the rule and use cycles, but I mean, when it looks this good, I couldn't reprimand you too much. So yeah, this is I was stunned by this image. So good stuff. Now for favorite lighting matches. All right, so I feel like people had fun with this exercise. I hope they did, because it's one of my favorite things to do currently to expand my own box of trying to learn new lighting techniques. And I wanted to highlight a few of them. So Ben, what I found interesting about you is that it started, initially it struck me as a problem that I saw with a lot of submissions, where you get a good lighting reference, let's say it's a portrait or something of a human, and then when you light it, it's not exactly the same thing. Like a full-bodied character is a pretty different subject than just a bust. And so a lot of people did that kind of thing where the model that they used was not close enough to the source in context. And so it was very difficult to compare and really analyze how much it matched. And someone I know used like a textured example of a lit and textured like models as a source, and then only rendered like the gray model, and they're just too disconnected. And that's what I first thought when I saw yours, Ben. But then as I started analyzing it and digging down as much as I could, like, okay, where are the lights positioned? What are the intensities and the hues of the colors? And the more I looked into yours, the more I thought this was a really close match. And so I remember that being the case, and so I wanted to put that in my favorites. You achieved something that I don't see too many people do with this exercise, and that's use a very different subject, but still it clearly looks like you match the lighting very well. Pavel, you did an excellent job. I mean, this is an example of using a very proper model to match the source, and I mean, it's very close, very, very close. I see, I haven't graded yours yet, so I will soon, but I mean, it looks like the same lighting setup, just with different models. It looks that close. So really nice work there. And then Aaron, similar to you, like this is another CG Cookie on the left. This is the source image. And you found that in the CG Cookie gallery. And I remember this one, but yours, I mean, the way your shadows are super close. Let me get rid of this. What is this thing? I guess I have to wait for that to disappear. Hold on. Okay, yeah, the shadows under the plane, like it's super close to what you did on the right. And that is impressive. I mean, you went really deep into matching that lighting, and so it looks really good. So awesome stuff. I think I had a couple more. Yeah, from Yukino. We've seen your Eevee model a few times now. It was one of my favorites from the previous class, and I mean, you really came close to matching almost exactly the render up here, the source image. And so that's another example using a proper source image and a proper model to match it. I think that's something that we all kind of learned. I I learned how important it was after I kept critiquing them, but hopefully you guys did too, that for the future light match exercises, try and find a model that matches the context of the source. And same thing with Katarina. Great job. I mean, we all know that you've got skills, and you showed that here, being able to analyze and kind of do lighting detective work from the source image and apply that to your own render. So great job. I'm looking forward to more of these because I really do find that, at least from critiquing, there's so much to analyze about a light setup and how to apply it in your own renders. So it's hopefully you're learning from it and you're having fun with it. Oh, I also should say, I meant to say this earlier, but as far as the EV and vehicle situation, I know that a lot of you were facing, I saw several complaints about like, it was just a hard week. It was a hard homework assignment. EV was fighting you guys. Blender 2.8 was fighting you guys. And I think I have to confess that the model I gave you was a little bit too high resolution. As I was looking back and wondering why the stream was so slow last week, the car model is, if you leave it as is when I in the model file that I provided, it's like 2.5 million quads, and that's like 5 million triangles. So it's a really heavy model, and I mean, considering how heavy it is, I'm kind of impressed that it has been doing as good as it is. So that, in hindsight, I kind of regret this model and not optimizing it a little bit more before I handed it off. I think that was probably the source of some of your frustrations and your PCs like not being able to handle it that well. So I apologize about that. Let's see. Crawford Darts, is the live stream up? I'm seeing starts in 15 minutes. Okay, yeah, they told you to refresh. Good. Any questions I'm missing? I'm wondering. Oh, good, Omar. Thanks. I'll try with Evie. I would love to see you do that. I really, really would. You would crush it. All right, I think everybody knows by now, if you have a question, just add the question prefix at the beginning, just so I can spot it very clearly when I go down the list. But yeah, all right, so that's it for looking back at week 2. Now let's get into week 3 itself, lighting characters with Blender. Again, this is a topic that's close to my heart. I have always been intrigued by character creation, both modeling, sculpting, texturing, lighting and shading, animation, all of it. I just have this interest in characters, and so I want the way that I'm going to go through like trying to explain what I've learned is to take you through my timeline and show you renders of how I progressed over the years. And the reason I'm going to go this way, my character's shading and lighting through the years, is that I hope that you guys will spot like a place in the timeline where you can relate to and feel like that this is where I'm at. So this is what I have left to learn, or this is how I can improve. And then maybe fast track your own journey through shading and lighting, based off of my like mistakes, essentially, and taking years to learn this somewhat the hard way, not really having the education that taught me this, up front. So anyway, we're going to just go through my renders. We're going to start from the very beginning. This isn't the first character render I ever did, but it is maybe the second. It is really early on, and it is, story time with Kent. It does feel a little bit like story time, but I think there's a lot to glean from these specific points. So we're going to analyze each of these images. This one is like a 100 by 100 image that I rendered in like 2003 maybe. Halo 2 had just come out, so I think that's the right year. And I had modeled that character, very proud of that model. And then I get to the lighting stage, and I had no idea what I was doing. No clue what I was doing. And I think it's super evident from this image. I mean, the model's mostly hidden in shadow. Look how much black is on the model. Now, I know that the character is black, like parts of his character texture is black, but black does not mean black, like where it looks pitch black. That's not what black means, even for a character painted black. Like you need to be able to make out the shapes, and that's not happening here in the shadows. The fact that I have one spotlight in the scene coming straight down, just is a poor choice. I just did not know what I was doing. So yeah, single spotlight for the key, and then maybe a generic hemisphere light for the world, and that's why you can even make out the world at all. It's not pitch black. So here we have no global illumination. That term was completely foreign to me. No ambient occlusion, no glossy reflections. This was pretty old style. All of that stuff existed back then. I was just completely unaware of it. And then the background, yeah, I mean, why in the world does Master Chief belong on a wood floor with a brick background? Like, isn't that scream 1990s, even though it wasn't the 1990s, but it screams 90s computer graphics. Poor choice, frankly. And yeah, this what in summary of this image, I had just no intention with the lighting. All I wanted it to do was light the scene so I could see my model, and that was it. And there was so many decisions within the intention that I missed, okay? And it worked out really poorly. So I don't think anybody's in this place, all right? Everybody's a little more advanced than this. So next, then this is early days. So both of these images are pre-college. Still no clue what I was doing. I think that's pretty evident. The model is slightly more illuminated. That's good. We see a little bit of reflectivity. I used, I think, the old school like reflective map. It's not actually reflecting the environment or HDRI. It's just like you put a texture to be mapped. Okay, in Blender, it's when you use the texture coordinates and they have that reflection option. It's like some weird way to project a texture onto the model that looks like reflection. So a very old school way to do reflections, fake reflections. Still only one spotlight, one hemisphere light. Like that's all I ever did. I never conceptualized the idea of multiple lights going on. So that is a swing and a miss. Again, no contact shadows. Look at Master Chief against the brick wall. There's no evidence that he's close to that wall. It looks like I cut and pasted Master Chief out of a video game screenshot, and that's being positive. That's being generous to my model, and then just pasted it over top of the brick. So it's lacking the depth. It's lacking three-dimensional tangibility. And again, still void of intention. I don't know. I don't have a bigger purpose to lighting other than seeing my model. That's pretty much it. All right, so let's progress a little bit into college. And I'm starting to make some important discoveries. 3-point lighting. Okay, very clear that I've got 3 lights in the scene. Mostly you can only tell that because of the shadows on the floor, right? I've got 3 distinct shadows emanating from the character's legs in a very uniform, like evenly spaced pattern. Okay, so apparently back then I thought 3-point lighting was just put 3 lights around your character, call it done. So it's poor 3-point lighting, but it is 3-point lighting. I discovered ambient occlusion. Obviously, I cranked that multiply level up to like 2 probably. And I remember when I discovered ambient occlusion thinking like, oh, that stuff on the internet, those images where the objects actually look like they're touching, that's what it is. It's ambient occlusion. And so I did learn that in college, applied it to all my renders generously. And it's like too much of a good thing, basically. But that's how you learn, I guess. Soft shadows. Also, I learned that with shadows, as the shadow extends away from the character, they start to soften. They're tightest around, closest to the character, and then they start to blur out. That was a big discovery. Hooray. Now, there were things that were wrong with it. Black shadows disappear into the black background. That's 2 problems. The black background, very, very dark black shadows. Like this arm arguably looks like it's super skinny. It's missing about half of its volume in the shadow. And, similarly around the crotch, like it's just pitch black, and that does not look good. It also means there's no global illumination still, no environment lighting, and very poor fill lighting. The other 2 lights other than the key light are not really doing much. It's not providing a rim light. It's not filling in the shadows very much. So, ugly. And then there's an abrupt end to the ground plane, which I mentioned in some of the vehicle. I saw this actually a lot in the vehicle renders where you put a plane on the ground and then it just ends very abruptly, just like this harsh line. And while it's easy to it's easy to create the plane and think like it's not important. The vehicle or the character model is the only important thing in here. So no one should be paying attention to the line back here. The fact is people do see the line and it's distracting, and it makes this, it just solidifies that this is a computer rendering. And that's not always what you want people to see, So I highly recommend that, and I stopped doing this eventually. You'll see I stopped doing it, but I never recommend having this stark line due to a plane. And it's monochromatic, right? I think I did warm up the key light a little bit because I remember a professor saying like never use white light only, put colors in your lights. But that's the only color I seem to use. Maybe I don't think there's any blue in the other fill lights or any other color. So ultimately it's like a black and white image. It's uninteresting because of that fact, where color can just start to inject some more appeal. All right, so that's kind of the beginning of college. Middle of college, I had a couple more improvements. I finally realized that gradient backgrounds look a lot more appealing. Okay, so for a long time, for many months, I was always doing the same background, like basically black with a like navy blue kind of fading to black. That's kind of what I always did. It is a slight improvement than the pitch black. It just shows that I'm putting a little bit of attention to the background. I'm acknowledging the fact that that is part of the image, even though it's not the focus of the image. It does need a little bit of attention. And then the edge of the ground plane is hidden. Notice that it is just a plane, but I realized that if I position the spotlights and soften the spotlight edge enough, then it looks like this kind of infinite plane blending into the background sort of situation. So that is an improvement, but we still have the same problem of overly dark shadows, and they totally blend into the dark areas of the background. And it's odd to look at. It loses the volume. It does not showcase the model very well. And it's just kind of a common amateur problem. Also still no global illumination, no environment light, and poor fill light. Same problems I had earlier. It helps to have like a textured character that helps it make it look a little bit better, but ultimately the lighting itself is not improving that much. Question, that Master Chief and Rome Caesar is in 3ds Max? What is Rome Caesar? What? Oh, this guy. Oh, that's actually, I modeled him off of Brad Pitt. I know you can't tell, but I don't have naked pictures of Brad Pitt, but like I had a 3DSK dude, naked guy that we were modeling, and I decided to model the head of Brad Pitt. So your question though, it is, okay, this one was modeled in Maya. The Brad Pitt was modeled in Maya. This one was modeled in 3D Studio Max. So yeah, the Master Chief was 3D Studio Max. All right, we talked about this guy. Oh yeah, the light color. I do believe that I started to play around with light color a little bit more. And the key light does look warm, obviously. And the shadow back here has a touch of blue, just a tiny touch of blue. So I was doing what the professor said, and I believed that it was a good thing, but I did not saturate it at all. Like it was too subtle, and it didn't really pay off. So it took actually a long time to get confident enough to like saturate light colors. I've mentioned that a few times in this class, but just in case you guys have a similar hesitation, do not be afraid to saturate colors. This is a great example of me being afraid to do that. Question, do you have tips for creating a smooth transition from a plane to an HDRI so you can spot differences so you can't spot differences that much? I do, yes. Let me, I'm not really planning, it's not going to fit into the demo necessarily, but what I like to do is use depth of field, basically. And, where can I find that real quick? Hold on, give me a second. Let me find an example of this. All right, sorry, give me 1 minute. Let me find an example, and I'll explain what's happening in the example. Sorry, entertain yourselves for a little bit while I find this. It's the holiday render that we did last year. It was a banner that we used on Facebook for... Oh, here's a great example. Here's an example. I don't know how great it is. So in this image right here, let me make sure that you guys are seeing that. Okay, you are. So, whoops, this is a spoiler just for you guys, but we're creating a Halloween version of this version. It's going to be this same kind of theme with Melvin, in this box, like it's a recurring theme. But the water that you see is just a plane. Okay, it's just a plane in Blender that I kind of made the edge jagged so it looks like a pond a little bit, and then the whole background is just a photograph that I've kind of tweaked a little bit, and so that serves as not even the HDRI, it's just a background, but the HDRI would do the same thing in this situation. And when I push the edge of the plane, the water plane back far enough and then turn on depth of field, all of my foreground elements are still sharp, but it blurs out in the background, so it looks like a cohesive scene. And that's my big suggestion for how to kind of fade it out. So in the car situation, like scale your plane, maybe turn it into a circle instead of a plane. Scale it out pretty far, and then put a lot of depth of field. But the further the further out you make the edge of your plane, then the bigger effect depth of field will have on the edge, while not necessarily affecting your car itself. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that it's a really powerful trick, because otherwise, like, creating this entire environment would be a big pain, but it's going to look like one cohesive environment in the end. So yeah, hope that was a decent answer for you. All right, so this is the end of college. We're going back to my timeline for how I'm improving and things I'm learning about lighting along the way. College improvements is the end of college. Improvements here. This was part of my demo reel, and it was a simple but effective background. I used this kind of noise texture to create like a smoky type haze, and so that provided the attention. It wasn't just pure black. It played off the light color. Like it was. Another note is the light. Actually, no, it's not a note. But the light colors. Oh yeah, distinct warm and cool light. It is more noticeable, the fact that on the right side it's warm, and on the left side, or the key light is warm, and then the left and right side has this kind of bluish sort of rim light. It's kind of like a side lighting. And so the background, it helped to have that little bit of texture, not to distract, but to fulfill that this was like a full scene. It didn't look lazy, and that was the whole goal of it. More intentional 3-point lighting. It wasn't just evenly placed. It was like I've got my key, and then I've got two extreme side lights that are giving me a more dramatic feel. A little bit of intention is starting to creep in. It's me realizing that, like, it's me starting to realize that if I want my model to look the best, I have to put effort into developing light skills, have intention, and kind of know a little bit more about what I'm doing. Still no GI, no global illumination, and no environment lighting. I had not even discovered those things yet. Still no glossy reflections either. This is the old style of like pure specular reflection. So it is a suit, and so that works okay. But like glossy reflections are a big part of realistic lighting. Any questions I'm missing? Oh, from Purple. I'm learning more here than in college. Most of my professors were like, just do what you feel like. Well, first, I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm definitely thrilled to hear that. It surprises me that like more college professors aren't teaching this, I guess. A few people in the Studio Cookie membership user base has said similar comments, and it just surprises me. Question, do you have tips for creating a smooth transition from plane? Oh, I already answered that. Awesome. A question, how do you avoid lighting looking bland, washed out, but not too saturated? How do you avoid lighting looking too bland? Let's see. I think you'll find the answer as I get through the presentation. I'm trying to, I don't know, like I don't have an answer to that question. Like I don't have that answer, but there's a lot of different things to think about when you're lighting, and to not look washed out or bland. It's going to be stuff like a focused rim light, which we're going to talk a lot about. That's going to be kind of the demo focus. Get a sharp rim light, sharper than what you see here, but it's also understanding like where shadows can be helpful. Not letting them be too black, not letting them be too bright either. But I'm going to talk about all of this throughout the process. So by the end of the presentation, or the lecture, if you still have that question, we can talk about that more. But I should be answering it for you. All right, so finally moving into career, which is arguably, not to knock my college experience, I did learn a lot, but I also didn't learn a significant amount. Maybe that is my answer to, college class. But some big improvements I learned quickly in my career from fellow professionals who like started unlocking Pandora's box for key things in the lighting and shading workflow. Glossy reflections. Okay, with this render, I'm finally starting to understand glossy reflections and use them on all of my objects. Okay, so it automatically has this more tangible feeling to the entire model. Fresnel is involved not only in the reflections. Actually, when I learned about Fresnel, I kind of went a little crazy. I would use it. It was always a solution to like a problem or an artistic technique that I had. I just used it all the time, and but for now, I'm using it here in the reflections, but also a technique that I'm going to show you in the demo. You can like use it to highlight the rim light especially and kind of accentuate the rim light unrealistically, but effectively. Okay, so I'm using Fresnel a lot. Area lights are better than spotlights. So before this point, I was using spotlights for everything. And I think I liked spotlights because you could blend out the circle, on the ground. And then was there any other reason to like spotlights? Not really. I just liked that. And area lights didn't make sense to me. But I remember in college someone kind of dropping a hint that he said one time he had a friend who worked on the X-Men movies and they only used area lights. And he just mentioned that in class. And I was like, what? The light I never use? Like, what's so special about that? And I never understood it until I got my first job and people were able to demystify the area light and show that at the time, it was the most physically accurate light by far than any of the other ones. And so anyway, here I learned area lights are better than spotlights. And now I never use spotlights except for the most rare occasion. I use areas for almost everything. Environment lighting. I'm finally realizing that you can plug an image into the environment and get a ton of fill light for free. It wasn't quite HDRI yet. Those took too long to render and seemed too complex for me, but even a JPEG in the environment slot would light up the fill light much more realistically and add a variety of colors there, or values and colors into the shadows. And so that really jumped up realism. An effective rim light, I kind of already hinted at that, using the Fresnel and also just understanding better light placement. The character here is starting to pop off of the background thanks to this really sharp rim light that you see. And that was a goal that I pursued for years, just not quite knowing. I'll show you why I thought it was so important. There's an artist named Sven Julin. And his render, he goes back a ways. Let's see, how old, I'm not sure how old this is, but I remember this render. And look at this rim light. It's like razor sharp, super bright. It's around the entire model, but it doesn't look like if you went into Photoshop and just added like an outline to everything. It doesn't quite look like that. It looks like it's part of the lighting, but I was just so enamored and chased this as a goal, trying to get this super sharp rim light. And this render in particular, it's way older than 4 years. I guess that's when ArtStation was created. But Sven is an incredible character artist and lighter. If you look at his work, he's really good at that. And then there's another render with the hammerhead. Where is that? Yeah, here. This one, another just beautiful rim light. Now, I think this I don't know that it's perfectly realistic. It feels to me like he is accentuating it a bit. And that's why I did it in my renders. I used the Fresnel to push that rim light a little bit further and really try and sharpen it along the edge. Anyway, that was a big deal. I think that's a crucial skill to have whenever you're lighting your characters. Specifically characters. Question, what is the difference between Fresnel and layer weight nodes? Which one should I use? Okay, so Fresnel, I'll go over this actually in the demo, but Fresnel is, as far as I understand, Fresnel is based on the scientific algorithm, like the formula for Fresnel. And so it's like, it's your scientific physically accurate Fresnel value. The layer weight is a more adjustable, non-realistic, but customizable value that I like to use usually. I don't always ascribe to the like physically accurate formulaic stuff. I like to know about it, but then I like to have artistic control. So that's what the difference is. I'm going to show you in the demo a little more clearly, I think. I hope the machines included Fresnel in the Matrix. If they're worth anything, they should. If they can create the Matrix, they should be smart enough to be aware of Fresnel. Everything has Fresnel. Yes, I hope you guys have seen that V-Ray short film. It's a perfect line. Any other questions I'm missing? Okay, no. Oh yeah. What does future Kent think of past Kent on how his work has evolved? Creating this lecture in this format, going back through the years, I look at past Kent as like hungry to learn, but a little impatient, I think. I wanted to get that render out the door before, without putting the time in to really understand lighting and things that didn't pertain to modeling, especially. Like, modeling was always the jewel for past Kent. Like, the model is the most important part. Models will make, like, bad lighting cannot hurt a good model, is kind of, I think, where I was at. And then slowly I had to realize, oh, well, textures play a big part. Oh, materials play a really huge part. Lighting plays a huge part, too. And so I think the past Kent was kind of a little impatient. Impatience is a part of who I am, but I've learned to be more patient and learn the bigger picture when it comes to computer graphics. Question, isn't Fresnel included by default in the principal BSDF shader? It is. And so typically when I'm just throwing like if I'm doing a quick scene and I have a bunch of objects to add a material to, I love the principled shader because it does have Fresnel built in and you automatically get a more realistic result. So it is built in by default. Sometimes though, whenever I'm really trying to hone in a render, for example, like this, if I was to achieve this, I would not trust the principled shader to do all of that. I would want to get in and really tweak the Fresnel to my liking and to my specific goals. And so in a situation like that, I probably would not use a principled shader entirely. Cool. All right, so where were we at on this guy? Effective rim light, attention to the background. Okay, so this time I'm like, forget the gradients, forget the simple stuff. I'm putting a legit background. This weird cybernetic warrior guy is in this like underground bunker because it's the apocalypse in the future, and this concrete bunker is all that he lives in. So that was my theme, and I think I did an okay job with it. However, you'll notice down here I have that also as a negative. I think it's a little bit too strong and possibly distracting in this specific case. So I think it maybe arguably detracts from the character just slightly. So I would have, in hindsight, maybe it taught me that you can go too much. I didn't pay enough attention to the background. Then I kind of went too far. And over time, I kind of more realized how to get back to the middle. Post-processing. With all of these previous renders, post-processing wasn't much of a thing. The idea of like putting final touches on your image or your render sequence with the compositor, chromatic aberration, lens flares, adjusting levels, changing the color balance. Like that wasn't a big deal. I didn't do those at all. These are pretty much straight out of the renderer. And then once I got a job and learned from fellow pros, like that's when I learned how powerful it is to tweak your render in the post-processing stage. And so here I added a couple lens flares, added some glow, added some noise, stuff like that. So that has a powerful effect too that I was not harnessing before this. But yeah, I mentioned the background's a little too strong and still no global illumination. It was around back then, but I was too impatient to wait for those renders or to learn about global illumination, so I still was not learning it. And arguably, like, I think it works without global illumination. I'm still fairly proud of this render, but just the fact is global illumination is missing, and that's a crucial part to true realism, and I just wasn't harnessing it back then. Next. All right, so this render right here is important because of that first improvement, shading and lighting confidence. Up until this point, I was still learning so much about lighting that every render was an experiment. Every render was like a kind of a risk, because I was trying things I'd not tried before, learning little bits and tricks that I had never used before. And so there was like a mix of confidence, but also like self-consciousness. What's the word? Insecurity, I guess, about like how good this was going to turn out. And then so at this point, I was pretty confident. I had done enough shading and lighting. I had been exposed to the key elements that I've been talking about, reflections and Fresnel and environment lighting, global illumination. I was confident enough in those things that I could start to make artistic decisions about what I wanted, and I knew what I was going to get, and I was confident about it. And that's important, I think, for you in your journey. When you do this enough, you will get confident, and you will be able to approach your art with confidence, humility, but like confidence to where like the knowledge of computer graphics isn't a hindrance. You're just able to harness it as you wish. That's an important step. And this was one of the first renders that I really felt that way. I got that super crispy rim light. That was all, a big goal for me. Again, it's like harnessing the lighting, but also adding it in Fresnel and kind of faking it, but getting a very appealing look to me. You can tell that it's fake because I'm getting this Fresnel like rim light where there should clearly be a shadow underneath the on this back leg. But I'm faking it, and it turned out fine. And this is a stylized character from Creature Box, and I was fine with it not being perfectly realistic. It's funny, like once, my journey was how to be realistic, how to render realistically, how to achieve perfect realism. And then once I kind of got there, now I'm never going to be there perfectly, but once I feel like I'm basically there, then I can choose to not do those things. And so in this example, I think Cycles was out, but I opted to not use Cycles, and I used Blender Internal. So I chose to do a certain style and harnessed Blender Internal to be the look that I wanted. And that also came with the confidence aspect. Intentional with color. If you notice, this is the first real time that I used like complementary colors. So like orange and, wait, are they complementary? I can't remember, but orange and purple look appealing together. And I intentionally chose purple instead of the typical either black or gray or like blue in this case. I always use blue. That's such a default for me. And so I used purple, and it was just the intentionality of like, this background color looks good with the character color. And, it was one of the first times I made that decision. It was among the first projects with Blender. Everything up until this point was either Maya or 3ds Max, V-Ray, Mental Ray, and this was one of my first projects with Blender. So this is when I started transitioning. Still no global illumination. Not really a problem. Again, I'm choosing not to use global illumination. Prominent AO, that I still, I was using ambient occlusion as like a pass, and it just, I can go on a spiel about ambient occlusion. Let me do that real quick. Basically, ambient occlusion is an incomplete global illumination. It only does the contact shadows of global illumination, but if you imagine like a corner of a room, right, like where the wall meets the floor, all right, and you shine a light into that corner. When you turn on global illumination, it's just no matter what, it's going to make that corner dark. But with global illumination, light shining into a corner sort of multiplies the light, so it actually brightens the corner. And so that's why I don't like ambient occlusion, because it darkens wherever it touches, and that's just, contrary to maybe popular opinion, it's a step away from realism and tangibility compared to having GI. And so anyway, I make a note, prominent ambient occlusion on the floor especially. You can see it multiplied down there. After this, I kind of learned to be a little safer with ambient occlusion, maybe a little more hands-off. Not so strong with it. And it's not exactly realistic, again, but that's okay. The confidence allows me to make choices based on my artistic opinion, not just pursuing realism only. So I think that's important. I think blue, cyan are complementary to orange, but I could be wrong. Question, are you saying that job will teach you more than a school? I think anyone will tell you that if they're completely honest. And like, I expect that from me. Like if you, whatever you learn from me, you're going to get in a job and you're going to have your own situations, your own problems to solve, your own tricks that maybe I don't even know about. And because you're doing a production, you're going to learn more. And there are going to be people around you who know more than you. And yes, typically, I think most people would say that they learn more in the job than they do in college. And that was true for me. But I do look back at my college experience, and there was a lot that teachers showed me that it would have taken so long to learn myself if I was trying to learn from YouTube only, or just trying to be self-guided, purely. So I do appreciate college, but there were some key things that I missed. Yeah, ambient occlusion is better for real-time engines. I think I would say, rephrase it, that it's necessary for real-time engines, because global illumination is not to the point of like cycles in real time. Global illumination in real time is not, technology is not advanced to be as good as cycles, in my opinion. And so same with EV, like ambient occlusion is kind of necessary until technology advances to do truer global illumination in real time. So I always see ambient occlusion as like a compromise on realism. It does improve things, but it's also a kind of hack until the technology can advance to be more correct. That's kind of how I see ambient occlusion. All right, so career, at this point I was at CG Cookie. I've been shading and lighting for years, and this is the realistic character course. And you know, I like this render. I think it turned out good. It's kind of maximizing everything I'd learned up to this point. So confidence in confidence in photorealistic techniques. It's that more fulfilled, like I know my way around a photorealistic scene for the most part. It can always be critiqued. I'm not saying that I achieve perfectly photorealistic renders, but I understand the techniques enough to convince your average person, right? Like if I called my wife in here and I was like, "What do you think of this action figure?" She might be able to say, "Oh yeah, that looks pretty cool. Do you want to get that for our son or something?" She wouldn't necessarily be like, "Oh wait, it looks fake because the Fresnel's not exactly right." So once I got to the point where I could convince the average person that it was real and not computer graphics, that's kind of when I feel like I can be confident in photorealistic techniques. And that's what I mean by that. Global illumination is involved fully with cycles, glossy reflections in full force, HDRI environment, purposeful and intentional. All of these things, you know, from what I learned over years, and by this point, you know, we're talking like 7, is that right? No, more like 6 years, I would say. 5 or 6 years of is what we've covered. No, well, once we got to college, that was like 5 or 6 years. All said and done, it's like 10 years. So that's what you've seen in this timeline, and I'm finally able to do what I want to do. But there's a caveat, because you're never done learning. I'm never done learning, and it's becoming very apparent to me with lighting that I need to level up my lighting. I want to level up because I do a lot of the same, and I've started to get bored. Around this time, I was starting to get bored with my habits. Everything was this kind of like always a navy blue background. The key light was always slightly yellowish orange. The fill light was always slightly blue. And even though I could position them the way I want to get that rim lighting, to get very believable renders, it's boring doing the same thing. And so right now I'm learning, I'm expanding myself in my lighting and shading skills by doing more abstract things. I'm trying to expand my mind in that direction. But just the point of this is, like, I'm not done learning, and you're not going to be done learning, but you should get to a point where you're confident in your ability to do photorealism or to do stylized things, yeah, it's just a confidence. You haven't arrived, but you're not done learning, basically, but you have learned all the key things. Let's see. Ambient occlusion is better for real. Oh yeah. Oh, so I think you guys are talking about like technology, and yeah, it's definitely coming. It's coming fast, and already it's crazy that Unreal especially can do amazing global illumination. But the fact that Eevee does have AO, the fact that that's an option, and it's kind of necessary. I put that note on a lot of your homework submissions. You kind of need AO. You need to make that compromise to get further down the road before we can eliminate ambient occlusion. Anyway, all right, so that's the career through the years. I hope you were able to identify somewhere in that timeline and be like, oh, this is where I feel like I'm at. This quality is where I feel like I'm at. So look what else I have to learn. I hope that's kind of what you gleaned out of that section. Moving on. Okay, yeah. Now let's talk about character lighting genres. And this again is it's not like a standard thing that you can find a library of character lighting genres. This is just how I approach my character lighting. It's what I've learned over the years, and how I make the decision of the genre along the way. And I choose one and I go for it. So I wanted to go through some of those so that you can hopefully start to make those decisions yourself. So first one is a model-centric type of lighting, where there's pure emphasis on the model. Okay, there's nothing about the form or shape left to the imagination. I'm not hiding anything in shadow. I'm intentionally trying to make everything very visible because this is a model I've created and I want you to understand it. Now, skip down a bullet point. Speaking of that, it's usually intended for fellow 3D artists, you know? Like, this is the type of render that if I were at a studio, and we did these type of renders at the studio I was at, where you create the model and you want to show the director a render. And so ultimately, the biggest point of the render is the model itself. It's not actually the lighting. That's not, you just want the lighting to emphasize the model. That's the model-centric genre. The colors are appealing. So I've got, in this particular render, and this is a newer render, so this was after I had kind of learned that, you know, add some color to your lights, but they're not overly saturated. They're a warm orangish with a kind of greenish blue as a fill light, but it's important that they're not distracting, okay? They're not too strong and they're not too crazy. If I had shown like, you know, that like, not tie-dye, but the orangish, oh, forget it, I'm not, never mind. It's not a super abstract bit of lighting. It's very controlled. And then there's no pretense about whether or not this is a computer-generated model, right? I'm not trying to convince you that it's a real toy. I'm not trying to be photorealistic in the explicit sense. I just want it to be a good model render. And so whoever looks at this, if they realize, yeah, it's a computer-generated model, I'm fine with that. That's the expectation, okay? And that's gonna be important going on to the next one. But this is probably, like, in my career, this has been the most common type of character render because, you know, I was a modeler at Real Effects for a long time and I was doing these a lot, just trying to showcase the model, always trying to kind of innovate, like, how can I showcase this model the best? And this is kind of where I ended up. Here's another example. It's a grayscale one. So this is actually more common. This is a little bit more... this is more abstract than what I did for Real Effects. Usually it would be something like this, kind of a very monochromatic render. But still, you know, the character, the model itself is what's being accentuated. Background is not distracting. It's very, very simple. And the character is what pops off. It's all about the model. Next, this genre I called Made You Look. All right, and it's an attempt at photorealism, as if my model is actually a photograph of a toy or like a physical sculpture, a 3D print, that kind of thing. And this is a common, I think, genre that you'll see on you know, ArtStation and things like that, where people will render it sometimes in a photograph, like, oh, here's my clay model, and then they'll show a wireframe below it. And I think that the power in that is that down here, I think I said, no, I didn't. Oh, I meant to say that, bummer. I meant to say that this can be seen by the average person, and they are convinced by it. I sort of mentioned that, I think, a few minutes ago. So this doesn't only speak to 3D artists, but it should also speak to non-3D artists. That, oh, that looks like a toy, or that looks like a physical object, and that's a powerful way to, I think, showcase your model. It definitely has its place, and it's fun to do. So in this example, it's supposed to look like a 3D print. You know, it's supposed to look like a 3D print that I like created this small light setup and used a couple small like desk lamps to create, and that means the lighting is based in reality. So like lamp sizes are I'm not going to go crazy with the lamp size. I'm not going to make it super big like I might in this type of render, but I will try and keep it based in reality so that I get a more realistic look. The simple background, that's typical, like a studio lighting setup. I do still keep the background simple, but try and make it realistic. A special attention to surface quality and final treatments. All right, so the important distinction, and where I spent a lot of time on these types of renders, is, you know, if I wanted to make it look like clay, I'm not going to model those like thumb marks in the model itself. I'll do that with a shader, and I'll spend some time to make a discernible surface texture, but not a distracting one, right? So thumb marks, little pop marks. I can't zoom in, but if you look closely, there's a little bit of like porous detail on the surface, and that breaks up the reflection. And 3D prints have that kind of texture, so that's why I'm going for that. But yeah, there's a lot of effort just in that that texture quality. An example, let me see here. From the light match that you guys inspired me to do yesterday. Let me find that real quick. I know this is a long lecture, but I hope you're getting stuff out of it, because I found that there's a lot that I like to share about this, and a lot to learn about character lighting. But in the community forum, let me find, where was it? Right here. So this one I did yesterday, and trying to be this kind of genre I'm talking about. And if you look really close, at first I rendered it and it was just perfectly smooth. It looked like a 3D model, overly smooth. But then going back in and just adding this subtle texture to the surface to break it up and add it as a normal map adds a whole nother level of realism, because so few objects, modeled objects like this have zero texture in reality. There's almost always some marks on it, whether it's little scratches, whether it's thumb marks in clay, whether it's pop marks like in a 3D print, ridges in a 3D print. That can go a long way for this kind of made you look realism, made you look model presentation. Let me see if there's any other questions I'm missing. Okay, yeah, that's it for the made you look. I think I did here's another example of trying to achieve a 3D print type model. A shader for the model, and hopefully you recognize, if you're in the 3D print world at all, like there is a specific type of resin that looks like this, and it like makes the details pop really hard. So I was trying to create that specifically, and yeah, so that is trying to be realism. Here's another one. I forgot to put this one in here, but this one, there's a style that I like that I tried to emulate, where people use this really stark yellow resin, and I can't remember the artist who I feel like made it popular. Someone did, and they started rendering. They provided like a light setup that you could purchase, and a lot of people started rendering with this kind of very yellow resin. I hope you guys know what I'm talking about. But it's based in reality. It's got very realistic subsurface shading going on, and again, that breakup on the surface. But well, thank you, Rita. So far, all these examples have been from me. So I modeled that policeman. I appreciate that sentiment. I will there are a couple examples from other artists, but so far we're just using mine. All right, so the next one, dramatic shading and lighting. Emphasis here is on the overall visual impact of the scene, and it's, even though it's based on a character, it takes into account the entire scene. So in this example, half of my character is almost entirely black, right? So you might say, well, you've been telling us not to do that. Well, you can if you're intentional about it and if you do it a good way. So in this was based on another artist. So like it was a light match exercise, and so I learned from them that this was a good way to do it, kind of thing. But even though it's black, we get this really cool silhouette only on half of the model, where on the background, since it's like a mid-gray, and so on the left side of the character, we have this beautiful, very distinguished silhouette. On the right side, we have it bright, and it's popping off of the background. So this is a really, really cool, dramatic setup where, I'm showcasing the model, but I'm also showcasing lighting quality, and that this is dramatic, powerful lighting. So they become, rather than the modeling being more important than the lighting, they become equally important. And the intended audience is, like the previous one, is for 3D artists and, like I said, muggles alike, non 3D folk. Like I could show this. I feel like these kind of renders you could hang up in someone's house, and people wouldn't be like, if you hung up if you hung up this, for example, I think they'd be like, what the heck? What is that? Like, is it art? Or, what is it? It's not necessarily art in the big sense, in the like hang it up at a museum sense. It's art to people like us, but it's also like technical, like, oh, look at the shape, look at the form of that 3D model. Whereas this is like, oh wow, the point is to be like impacted by the overall visual. Okay, so there's high contrast. Again, shadows are welcome. That's pretty common with dramatic lighting. And there's a tendency toward, but not limited to, photorealism. This one also I tried to make look like a photo of a statue. And we've got like a realistic texture on the floor of like a wooden surface. So you see the wood grain and nice reflections. The back has like a subtle texture as if it's like a wall, a stucco wall or something like that. But yeah, this does point towards photorealism. Okay, so here's another dramatic example. All right, so this is the Goblin that I think I've brought up before, and you know, even though you can see the entire model, you can make it out. It's definitely a dramatic lighting situation. Very strong shadows, high contrast, super purple fill light, very, very warm, bright orange key light. You know, I think I talked about this earlier about how on the top it's very blown out, and then towards the bottom the key light sort of fades away in intensity. And overall, it's just a dramatic light. It's not, if I was in the modeling department at a studio, I would not get my model signed off based on a render like this, because it's not showing and emphasizing the model enough. It's for an overall effect. Hope you guys are tracking with me. Hope I'm making sense. Okay, now abstract. This is my newest frontier for shading and lighting personally, because you can do some fun things with abstract lighting. You can see models in a different way. And so it's expanding what I know of lighting, and I'm really enjoying that. But in this example, a few of you matched it this past week. It really feels like painting the character with light, and I think that's a cool way to look at it. Whereas, you know, you're not trying to match realism. You're not really caring about. You're not caring about like reflections necessarily. You're literally just like casting bright light onto your character, brightly colored light, and it ends up, I don't know, it can be pretty cool. It can be an effective type of visual in the end of it. It's unrealistic. Okay, this is, I thought was kind of a neat, well, I'll wait till the next slide for that. Often abstract renders are like vibrantly colored. From what I can tell, it does, a key element involves bright, vibrant colors, and since that's not that common in reality, usually you have like sunlight, or you have a warm incandescent light, you know, your computer screen. Only in rare situations like at a club or in Times Square do you see like, you know, really vibrant lights. And so that's fun to experiment with. And there really aren't any rules in the abstract space necessarily. I tend to always apply abstract things to real. Let me explain in this next image. What I mean by that, here's another abstract, or kind of an abstract render that I did, matching someone else, a CD Cookie member actually. But like this extremely pink and rose-colored fill light is very weird. It's not real. Like it's not what I see in reality. So it's trying to be a little bit abstract. And then, so here's an example of like very realistic lighting, but abstract light sources. Okay, so you can't tell from this render, but the artist Marco De Luca. Oh, Kent, did you know that light painting is an actual photographic technique? I did not know that. I don't spend as much time studying photography as I need to, as I wish I did. It's kind of one of those things. One day I'm going to spend more time studying this, but I did not know that was a technique. See, everything's already been discovered. You know, like this. that's what it feels like. I thought I was kind of clever, like painting with light, but no, that's just everyone else. Other people have already discovered that, so that's cool. It's cool that it is already like a standard, understood kind of technique. All right, yeah. So back to this. Marco posted other images of this from different angles, and this bright light, this kind of halo, is literally a circle, a glowing circle that's intersecting the middle of the head. Like it's just going right through the head. And then this ball is a sphere, a glowing sphere. Now, that's not really what you see in reality, but I think he's doing it intentionally and artistically. So it seems that he's testing subsurface shading. That's a common thing whenever you're creating a realistic character render like this, is get the subsurface correct. And the two key places that you check that are the ears and how those handle subsurface, and also the fingers. All right, and that seems to be exactly what he's going for. Like, put a bright glowing ball, abstract an idea, but put that in the hand and let it realistically be computed by the render engine. And that's what I mean by like abstract light sources based in reality. You know, like I'm not creating some abstract global illumination for a formula or something like that. You're using realistic global illumination, realistic light calculation, but you're providing like abstract light sources. And so I think that this is really cool, really clever, interesting, memorable way to showcase an artist, or showcase a model. And I thought this was great. And then another one from Andre Lauren. You know, like to me, this would be the focus, the actual focus of priority in the image is the bust, is the model itself. But then you kind of throw this funny binary code type of halo around the character, make it bright pink, and you immediately it's more noticeable than a render like this. To me, it automatically, even if I like this one more, even if you end up saying like ultimately I like this one, this guy is more memorable. Like it's just a like punctuation mark, right? It's like not punctuation, like an exclamation point. And then it also kind of has this element of a narrative, like, oh, what is that halo about? Like, why is that there? Like, that's intriguing, and it just makes you kind of invites you to stare at the image a little bit longer, makes you linger there, and I think that's cool. Like, I'm imagining if I'm at a studio, like hiring a new artist, and someone provides this. I'm like, okay, that's cool. It looks kind of like everybody else's reel. It looks like everybody else's portfolio. But then I see someone lighting like this. I am going to remember this person and be like, huh, just as good of a modeler as everyone else. And everyone else is as good of a modeler as this guy. But he or she's got an extra thing, an extra spice to their artistry. That's kind of what I'm learning from abstract lighting. And that's kind of a fun new frontier for me personally. That was it for character lighting genres. Oh, I forgot to fill this out. Nuts. So this is actually week 2 stuff. Let's go back to what's the agenda for this week? Week 3. So okay, the courses, modeling realistic characters, the presentation chapter specifically. That's going to be talking about creating a render for this guy right here. Texturing and shading a stylistic character. That's this one in the middle. I go over, similar lighting techniques and concepts there. So use those as like a foundation, as like a resource, helpful resource as you go throughout the week in trying to light your character. And then the homework, we're going to be lighting your character model in a way that's appealing, all right? The way I put it is light it and shade it in a manner that's meant to impress. All right, and that's open for interpretation. Try to impress me. That's kind of that's the goal I want you to do. That's the goal we always have with creating renders is to impress, is to showcase the quality of this model and that you work so hard on, make it memorable for people. So try that, and then you have another light match exercise. It can be a character or it can be another vehicle. Like it can be really anything. Just find an image of lighting that you render or a photograph of appealing lighting, and then create a render. Similar context. That's what we've learned from last week. Try and find something in a similar context, a model that you can use. Ideally one of your own, but if not, you have Blend Swap, you have Sketchfab, and I think I provided the Goblin character if you want to use that. But yeah, that's for the lighting character. You can also use it for the light match if you want. But yeah, just create lighting and analyze it, be a lighting detective, and match that as close as possible. See what you learn from that process. All right, that is it for the lecture, and that was like an hour and 15 minutes. I think that's the longest one yet. Sometimes I'm concerned that it's not that interesting because people on YouTube always complain about the lecture portions. But hopefully with you being here and being able to ask questions, you kind of get why I start this way. Because a lot of this doesn't really fit in a tutorial where you're pushing buttons in Blender. But now that we've gone over it conceptually, we can dive into Blender and do some of this stuff. So for the next 45 minutes, what I'm going to focus on are 2 things: the rim light, how to achieve a decent rim light. We're not going to be using this, actually. We're going to be using this one. Yeah, so I want to show you like my process for achieving a very sharp rim light. I've kind of been talking about that a lot, and I think that's one of the most important things to do when it comes to character rendering. Have that as a tool in your back pocket, sharp rim light. And then we'll also look at breaking up the surface in what I talked about, like for photorealistic, for that made you look kind of genre where you want to break up the surface for an added layer of realism. Awesome, Wilco. I appreciate that. All right. Yeah, I guess we'll just get into that and take a quick sip of water because I can't believe I just talked for an hour and 15 minutes. I used to wonder how like conference speakers did it, or like pastors who talk every Sunday for an hour. And now I realize, like, once you're talking about something that you care a lot about, time flies. All right. Let's get into rim lighting with this character. I am going to be using cycles, so I've got 2.8 open, though I also, this is not specific to 2.8 at all. It's just a technique that can be used in, any version of Blender and really any kind of modern 3D package even. So where it's default Eevee, we're switching to cycles. And use it, global illumination, centric engine, physically based. It's going to do a lot of the work for us. And I want to check on performance, make sure that my threads are set to 8. So the stream hopefully doesn't chug or anything. All right. First thing to do, let's just turn on the render down here. On the bottom right, I've got a little window that's specifically for rendering. It's a small one, so it goes a little faster. And it's pitch black. So that means we have nothing in the scene right now. Let's add... First, a reminder, Yukino asked before the stream started, show me how to set up a scratch with depth and how to change the color. That's right. Thank you, Aaron, for reminding me. In the second half of the demo, I'll do that because I think it would make more sense. I'm going to address the material on the model, and I'll go over that kind of technique. Yeah, it should be relevant there too. Thank you for the reminder, Aaron. I appreciate that. So we've got, let's start with an area light. Remember I said that that's kind of the typical place to start. And it really is because it provides, the reasons to use an area light is a spotlight does not have, like in the computer, it starts out at like a singular point in space that's just emitting a bunch of light. Whereas an area light has a big square or a rectangle that is going to be visible in the reflections. And that's how real lights are. Whether if you have a real spotlight in reality, it's actually a bulb that is being, concentrated in a certain direction. It doesn't just start out of nowhere. And so in real life, spotlights do reflect a little more realistically. Area lights are just stick with area lights. Like learn how to use those. That's the better choice. So we're going to go with light, area light. And we are going to, the first thing I'm going to do is just put it directly behind our character. I just hit it. All right, we're just going to put that right behind the character and see what we get. Okay, so right off the bat, it's too small. Okay, we see a little bit of, it doesn't look like rim lighting, but it's lighting from the back side. If we go to our light options here, I always get confused with the new icons. That to me looks like it could be a spotlight. But this area light essentially, so if the icon says area light, that must be what you need to use. And we're going to increase the size. Okay, so the size value right here, let's jump up to 5. Well, as we just look at what it does in the render. All right, as we go down or as we go way up. Now, that probably wasn't a big difference to be noticeable. Basically, when we make the size bigger, we give more surface of our model a chance to reflect that light. So if I make this really big, like 20, it does get a little bit more dim, but we're starting to see a little bit more rim around the overall character. So let's increase that strength significantly, like 500. Okay, now we're starting to, just by increasing the intensity, we're starting to get more rim light all over the place. But I mean, you can kind of push this extreme, and this is, remember when I said when you're doing the realistic lighting, you want to base your lights in reality. Well, this is an example where I'm not basing my lights so much in reality, and I can make this light massive, like 50, okay? And then if we increase, let's say 2000 intensity, how about like 5,000? We have to go way up because we're so far away. Now we are starting to get that rim light all around the surface, okay? So this is a quick and dirty type rim light, but it's an option, but we don't have to do it that way. We can use multiple backlights. So for example, let's just shrink that back down to like 20, and we're going to move it a little bit off to the side. Okay, we'll give it kind of jurisdiction for the kind of back half of the character. Yeah, sorry, brain fart. Let's use individual origins. So with this area light, keep in mind that the rim light is going to be partially it's going to be partially illuminated, but also reflected, okay? Because this big rectangle is going to be seen by the object's reflection. So right now, it's not really present. We need to add a material. All right, so I added that material, and let me increase the sampling. Viewport, let's do 100. Render, let's do 256. All right, so now you can see that, well, let's remove the material. All right, notice the difference in rim light. It's not very sharp around the edges, and there's no rim light around certain parts. When we add that material back, all of a sudden we're getting more rim light. Okay, that's actually reflection. It's not illumination. It's reflection from the Fresnel-based reflectivity in the principled shader. All right, so reflection plays a part in crisp rim light as well. Let's move this a little bit closer. Look at that. Boom. Now we're starting to get that razor sharp rim light. It's looking great. Let's duplicate this light and then rotate it around the cursor to the other side. Well, that didn't really do what I wanted. Okay, and it doesn't matter, you know, like where it's positioned, obviously, but like as I start to rotate this around, the rim light stops being a rim light and becomes a key light, right? It's starting to illuminate directly, but a rim light, you want it to be really bright and from behind and large, okay? That's hopefully what you've been learning through this example. But now we're starting to achieve that really sharp rim light. Okay, that's great by itself, but what about incorporating it into the bigger render, right? Because where's my key light? Where's my fill light? Where's my environment light? Those are kind of necessary. We've just so far created rim light by itself. Yeah, so let's create a world first. Well, no, I'm actually going to duplicate this light and create a key light. All right, so pretty standard like stuff with the key light. I'm just going to put it, you know, kind of upper quadrant, upper like corner of the model. So let me decrease the size. I'm going to make it like pretty small. Also decrease the strength to, let's go way down to like 100. And I'm going to put it pretty close to the model. Chat's pretty quiet. Are we learning? Are we bored? Curious. Let's increase the strength up to like 200. Oh, I also need to keep in mind, okay, so I'm trying to gauge a good strength for the light, but the model, when we add a default material to it, can we go back to 2.79? You want me to stop this and do it to 2.79? Wouldn't using Eevee be faster for previewing your lighting in this case? So I did not, even though what I told you about last week, the fact that I think the car was just too high resolution, I didn't test Eevee again, so I'm a little skittish to start using Eevee because I don't want it to mess up the stream. But literally, like, I don't know, Cycles is being pretty fast for me right now in this. When doing character lighting like this, it's pretty fast. Like, that is not noticeably desperately slower. But anyway, I didn't really intend this class to be like all Eevee. I don't want, I mean, Cycles has a lot of power, and I want to get exposure there. Oh, cool. So listening, learning, cool. But to your point, KJ, Eevee is a great option, and if you want to use Eevee for this week, go ahead and do that. I think Eevee would handle this really well. What I know right now is different about Eevee is global illumination is not great with Eevee, and it's very approximated at best. And so right now, if we zoom in, we're getting a lot of beautiful, this is that kind of multiplying effect that I told you about, like when a light source directly shines on a crevice, it's going to actually brighten that crevice, like be inverse AO. It's going to brighten that space. And currently, Eevee doesn't do that kind of thing. So with Eevee, let me say it this way: with Cycles right out of the box, I can just get a very realistic result by adding a few lights in here. With Eevee, you've got to jump through more hoops to get it looking like this. And so for this demonstration, I wanted to focus on lighting and less on Eevee and the different way of doing things, because Cycles does more for you out of the box. So just for the sake of progress, purple kaleidoscope, you can absolutely use 2.79 for this week. Again, nothing I'm teaching you here is specific to 2.8, but I think I just had it loaded and went with 2.8 anyway. Still trying to get used to it myself, so getting used to it means spending more time in it. But yeah, you can use 2.79 if you'd like. Initially, I read that as you wanted me to stop doing it here and then jump over to 2.79, but I don't think, maybe that's not what you meant. Anyway, all right, so I was talking about how to find good values for your light, like your light intensity, your light strength. And right now, a default material in Blender makes the color almost white. So when you think that this is a white object, it kind of reveals the fact that, oh, the lighting is underpowered. Okay, so to make it look white, this light should be, I don't know, like 500. Now it looks like a white object. Okay, but typically what I like to do is dial this down to more of a 50% gray, and that helps with getting more proper light values, light strengths. I'm just going to call this the model. Or let's just call it gray model. All right, so now we've got a key light. What has this done to the rim light? Because it does have an effect, and the rim light is less noticeable at the moment. I mean, maybe obviously because it was just pure black before. So we have some options. Let's first introduce some color. I like to get in the habit of doing that sooner rather than later. And this won't be especially different. It'll be kind of the typical warm and cool light. Just because I'm comfortable with that. It's pretty safe. So we're gonna have some bluish, maybe a little bit of like purple on that side. Nah, since I'm focusing on the rim light, I might actually leave them closer to white. I'll leave this one blue. We'll see how that goes. All right, so let's crank up the intensity so that they show up a bit more. Let's go to 10,000. Also, you can just type in times the asterisk 2, and you can just double your rim light really quick. So click on it, asterisk 2, and you're doubling it. Wait, that didn't seem to work. Oops. That was supposed to be a quick tip, and it's kind of devolved to being slow. There you go. That's how you can double it. And with rim lighting, you want it to be really strong. So I'm at 20,000 right now, and I think that's probably, a good value. Yeah, so it's looking kind of cool. Oh, yeah, you're right. Well, you mentioned the fangs, and I don't think they're sharing the right material. There we go. Now all of these the model pieces are sharing the same material. Okay, so we've got a render with pretty strong rim light. Let's do an actual render so we can start to compare with changes we're going to make next. Let me make sure my render settings aren't crazy. Let's go to 50%. Performance fixed. Okay, I like 32 tiles personally. And it shouldn't take too long to render. Any question? Notice you can drag this little black dot to aim your light. Oh, that's pretty cool. I think I know the black dot you're talking about too. All right, so cool. We've got a pretty strong rim light situation. The only potential negative, and I remember coming across this a lot over the years when I was trying to really perfect the rim light, is, you know, not all the areas have it. You know, it's very consistent right here back on the back. It's consistent around the tip, but then it's not consistent other places. You know, the back of, well, that's all right. You know, the back of this, of his ear right here is not that consistent. There's not a lot of rim on the top of the head or this other, I guess it's his eyebrow. So while this is arguably realistic, I want to push it a little bit further, and I'm going to do that by faking it essentially. So let's go to slot number 3. And I'm going to adjust the material itself. This is kind of a trick, you know, using Fresnel to accentuate your rim lighting. We're going to go to the shader nodes, switch over to object mode. Okay, there's my nodes. If you ever can't find your nodes like this, just hit A and then period on the number pad. All right, that will focus in on your nodes. It will select them first and then focus in on them. But I find that happens kind of a lot for some reason. What were we talking about? All right, yeah, so using Fresnel. Someone asked earlier about what's better, Fresnel or layer weight. Now, if you add the Fresnel node by itself, you see the only modification you can add is the index of refraction. And that's a scientific value of things that really exist in life. So if we look up Fresnel IORs, there should index of refraction list. Yeah, so these are, I believe, yeah, index of refraction values for use with 3D modeling, rendering, and animation stuff. So this minimum index of refraction value is what you would plug in. If I'm trying to create aluminum, for example, like it has that reflection or that Fresnel value. I'm pretty sure these are Fresnel because you can't see through aluminum, so it's not going to be refraction, index of refraction. So you would just plug that value in to your shader right here. And technically that is the aluminum index of refraction. So some people like to operate that way when they're shading so that they're like, they can think, or they can say to themselves like, this is physically accurate. This is scientifically correct. That's fine and good. I find that robotic and kind of stiff from an artistic perspective. So I rarely use Fresnel. If we look at the value by itself, which by the way, I'm enabling that, I'm able to do that because I have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, and shift clicking will just plug it into what they call a viewer node, and that's why you can see the pure output by itself. And so it's not white to black, it's kind of this gray value up to like a whitish value. But you can get the idea that the white value is going to be what we use to emphasize the rim light. So we can use this if we wanted, but I typically like using the layer weight. Okay, so that's a very similar thing. In fact, are these exactly the same? I think the default is 1.4. Reset to default value. That's not the default value. Are these exactly the same? No, they're not. So even the layer weight has this Fresnel input. I don't really know why, because it's not exactly the same as this Fresnel, and we don't have an index of refraction option. We have a blend, which I think is essentially the same thing, but it's not a scientific number. Let's try, it was 1.39. 1.39, did they look the same? No. All right, so the blend is just a different way to adjust this. I don't even pay attention to the blend, frankly. I instead go to a converter color ramp, and this is where I adjust my rim light to how I see fit. I use the facing value, not necessarily the Fresnel value. I usually use facing. Change this to like ease, and then I can dial down my Fresnel to be really, really focused on the rim. Okay, so we're going to use this to further emphasize a really sharp rim light. and I'm going to use that as an addition, color, mix RGB, change the operation to add, put this Fresnel value where the white values will be added, black will do nothing. Put that on the bottom layer, and then copy this color value. Just hover over it, Control C, paste it right here. Well, I guess it was the same value anyway, 0.5. All right, now if we look at that, this is going to be the color value that we plug into our base color for the material. All right, so it should be subtle enough that it doesn't disrupt the realism, the tangibility and believability that we're going for. So let's render this and see what the difference is between the previous render. Question, do you think these lighting techniques would work with animation as well, or would movement change the way to think about lighting? Great question, because there are definitely some techniques that work well for still renders but don't work well in animation. Everything I've shown you so far should work well with animation. So long as your camera is not rotating around the character at any point and seeing the super bright backside of the character. In other words, it's not seeing this. Obviously, that's not appealing. We don't want to see that in an animation. But as long as the camera remains, in the same position relative to the lights, it should look good throughout animation. And this technique should look fine as well. So here's what it looks like with the Fresnel technique. Alt-J. Okay, so it's subtle, right? Like it does cater to this, it adds to the rim light, but it's not crazy, because if you made it crazy, it could disrupt the realism negatively. But in this situation, it's just a nice little push over the edge toward. Well, there is maybe a slight problem inside the mouth. It kind of brightens up the mouth. That might be something I want to consider. Well, you don't have to use an add, perhaps. Like you can use like an overlay. Let's see what that does, just for kicks. Let's change the option here to be overlay. Where is overlay? Okay, so it sort of darkens the color. Let's see what that, yeah, it kind of just darkens the color. That's not really what I expected. Or that's not really what I cared about. But there's other ways that you could incorporate the Fresnel and make it respect the lighting a little bit more. Right now, it's not respecting the light so much. It's just changing the base color. So, I don't know. I actually really like the effect currently. So I'm just going to leave it at the addition. Oh, and we also are at 0.5. So we can crank it up to 1, and that will increase the effect. Oh, that's maybe more what I was expecting. Let's do a render like that. You can also hover over the one that you want to change and press E to get the color picker. Huh? Where do I press E to get the color picker? In the viewport or something? Okay, this is kind of cool. I actually think I like this one a little bit better. Okay, so let me see here. All right, this is no Fresnel rim light helper. This is first level that we did, and this is second level. So it's just a brighter rim light helper. And I like it. We get that really, really sharp. This is what I was always looking for back in the day, was super sharp, super crisp rim light that makes the character jump off the screen. All right, so Grady, over the color you want to change. In the, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Look at that. So you can hover over a color swatch and hit E. Never knew that. And then you can click literally anywhere. I'll bet it even covers this blue color. That's wild. That's awesome. That's good. Thank you, Grady. I appreciate that. Things you learn, man. There's so many hidden features in Blender that's really, really helpful. Little Easter eggs all over the place. Add and... I mean, overlay would look kind of cool. Well, not that much. Now I'm going to leave it. Getting distracted. There we go. So that is Fresnel. I wanted to show you how you could use that technique to emphasize your rim light. Rim light was just such a mystery for so long for me. So I wanted to share that with you so it's not in case it was a mystery for you. Let me go back. I did want to address... Where was it? So these little... Pavel mentioned the Backlight. What does that do? Oh... Interesting. So you can kind of, that's a cool little technique. That's kind of neat. That's what I think you're talking about with that black light or that black dot. Grady, did I fully answer what you were saying? Or Phil? So everything I've shown you so far should work with animation as well. I've used Fresnel this way in animations a lot, and it doesn't ever cause problems in my experience, because it behaves like you can orbit around. Maybe that's a good way to measure it. Like if you can orbit around in the viewport and it still looks fine, or if you rotate the model and it continues to look fine, then it should look okay in animation. Maybe that's, you know, a starting point for judging whether these techniques could be used in animation or not. If you ever use, where it gets to be a problem, I know off the top of my head, is like if I were using, nope. Whoops. So here, you know, if I've got texture coordinates, texture coordinates can get a little weird in animation. You know, if you use UVs will be fine, but if you use like camera or object, those can get a little weird. I know for sure that those get a little weird in animation if you're not careful. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, I suppose, is creating like a surface quality on the model that just breaks up the reflections. Because right now, if we zoom in, it's just a perfectly smooth, very computer-generated kind of surface. Maybe like a toy, but if you want realism, you're going to put a little bit of wear and tear or porous nature on there. So I wanted to show you how I kind of create, you know, drum that up procedurally for a moment. Save, please. Yes. Though this isn't, not too much has happened, but I will save it because I don't want any of you to worry. All right, let's break up that surface. I'm going to do this by layering noise textures and adjusting their vector curves. So let's add an input noise texture. I'm sorry, a texture noise texture. All right, and we'll control click on it so that we see the raw data. And I don't want the color, I want the black and white. All right. Couple things I'll do first is increase the detail level to like 10, because if we zoom really close in, if that's on 2, it just looks a little bit more blurry. The higher you make this, the higher frequency of detail there is in that noise texture. Oh, you'll notice that my, that's not going to be too big of a deal. My texture space is a little bit different on the tooth, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that. Let's change the scale value to like 2. I don't know. I need to actually adjust a color ramp, adjust the levels a bit. I'm just trying to break this up and have a little bit more contrast. Something like this. And now I'm going to hit Control T. That will create texture coordinates and a mapping node. And I'm also going to change this mapping node to be with a Shift S, switch the type to input, no, I'm sorry, vector curves. I think I almost never, when I talk about shaders, I'm going to add or nodes I'm going to add. I almost never get the right menu first mention. Okay, so purple kaleidoscope. That's cool using the Fresnel with the rim light. Is this in shaders or adding more nodes to the lights? It's in shaders. It's in the material itself. It's not adding anything to the lights. No light nodes. All right, so we've got this vector curves. Now, what in the world is vector curves for? You have X, Y, and Z. So they're vectors in space. They're actually axes in 3D space. So if I adjust this curve, you'll see that it kind of moves the texture around in our 3D viewport. So if I just slightly do that, and it kind of stretches it and like makes it a little bit different, essentially. But where it gets interesting is, and some of you would know this if you've seen my shader forge, like a whole world of procedural possibilities happened whenever I plugged in a noise texture or any texture into the factor of the vector curves. So let's plug in this noise texture and zoom in to see what happens. I should probably change the scale to like 5 and maybe increase the effect of these. But all of a sudden, I hope you guys can see this, but we get a much different type of noise texture. All right, so if I take this off, it's kind of a splotchy, uniform texture. But if I plug this in, now it's got like a swirly pattern to it. It's almost like actual clouds in the sky. And we can keep adjusting this as we wish. You know, like, oh man, look at that pattern. How cool is that? That little swirl, it looks beautiful. So plugging in that noise texture takes this to that noise texture into vector curves takes this to a whole new level. All right, and we can start to build out a bump map based on this. All right, I'll be finished in about 15 minutes. Keep an eye on my time. Also need to do that thing for you, Kino. I've not forgotten. I thought about the Fresnel rim light hack while doing the light match exercise, but decided that it will be cheating. No, it's. I respect the concern, but once you that to me says you're ready to start using the Fresnel. The fact that you were concerned about it means you're ready for it, kind of thing. You were already thinking outside the box. You knew what you wanted to do artistically, and you knew that Fresnel would be a way to get there. If you needed to emphasize the rim light that you saw in the source, that's absolutely valid. Yeah, that it means you're ready. Oh, I found that it's a lot easier to use the search function. That's pretty smart. I don't think where is search? I've never used this before. Look at that. One massive list of all the nodes. Huh, that's pretty cool. It's cool that it's there for sure. Yeah, that's great. All right, so I'm trying to turn this into a bump map. That's right. I'm going to add a vector bump. And we're going to take this value into the height. All right, so now we can see if we just control click, we get a very rough, like normal view of normal map view of what this bump map is looking like. The strength at 1 is way too high. Let's go down to 0.1, and that can give us an idea of how strong it's going to be. Let's plug that into the normal value. At this point, I think I probably need to. It's going to clean up slow enough that I need to like do an actual render. Let's make sure I'm on a different slot. Okay, so that was layer 3, 4. I lost a render. I thought I did one on 4. Anyway. Question, in which case textures are like, in which cases textures are used in the lights? Oh, I see what you mean. When do you use textures for lights? I've only done that maybe once, and when I did it, no, I've done it twice. Anytime you want to use a light for like IES, let me see, Blender IES lights. This is a great thread on Blender artists. IES lights. Maybe this one's good. Yeah, right here. So if you add a texture to lights, if you add a color ramp to lights, you can get effects like this. Okay, so it's the it's an architectural visualization where you see a certain pattern from the light. I think it's what happens to the light when it goes through the glass, typically. There's all these patterns that can come about, and by default, you don't get these patterns with Blender, but if you add a texture to the light, you can get that effect. That should be another like stream that I do one day on how to get these specific light patterns. So I've done that, and the only other time is when, like, what's an example? Like, this kind of thing where you get shadows from trees, right? Like it could be computationally very difficult for your computer to calculate an actual tree model with lights casting realistic shadows in this way. So it might be more valid, if you're not going to actually see the tree, to just add a texture like this to the light, and it will create the similar effect. Excuse me. Ooh. All right, so that's two examples. Typically, though, I mean, I don't use textured lamps that often. Oh, I forgot to turn denoising on. I set my samples intentionally low, but I did not turn on denoising. Let me try that one more time. Sorry. Yeah, we're kind of wrapping. We're getting close to the end of the stream. I do need to do that thing for Yukino. But I'm going to wrap up like how to get this surface a little less uniform, because that was a note that I gave a lot of you on the homework, where it was like, good job on the mud splatter, but the fact that it's all over the car makes it unrealistic. Like, mud splatter is going to be concentrated certain places and not in other places. Or the like condensation pattern on the car paint. I remember, I think I gave the note that like it doesn't need to be that uniform all over the place. And so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about how to concentrate stuff procedurally. Yeah, cathedral windows. Yeah, that's a good example too. Question, so to be extra sure, we can use cycles for homework this time? Yes, you can. I wanted you to definitely use Eevee for last week's homework, and then the rest of the month you can use whatever you want, cycles or Eevee. So I just wanted you to get some exposure to that new hype render engine called Eevee. Oh, also work for underwater. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Like the caustic effect on the seafloor. Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be really difficult to render with cycles. Caustics are notoriously painful for a computer to render. It just takes forever. However, doing a texture on the light would be a great way to achieve that. So, John Sanderson, good idea. If somebody's happy about noise textures, good. I love noise textures. I have so many possibilities. All right, so let's look at the actual render itself. All right, so this render, or the texture so far, it just seeks to break up that surface. All right, whereas before it's super smooth. This would work fine, if you're doing that model-centric lighting genre where you're trying to showcase only the model. This is actually maybe preferable, but when we start to add this kind of effect, it looks more like kind of like a rock sculpture, or a like something, not quite something made with clay, but in that genre. It's just got texture to it, and it's more tangible, and it also breaks up the lighting really nicely. Right here, all the lighting is very smooth gradients, and then all of a sudden it starts to be broken up, and it just adds more intrigue to the surface. And we're talking really small level, like once we zoom out, it's not something you really concentrate on, but it just gives an overall feeling to the image, to the render. And then what did I want to do? Oh, I wanted to break it up, because the one note that I have right now is it's the same exact pattern or quality of pattern, intensity of pattern over the entire thing. And that, I don't really want that. I want to break it up more. Let's go to the shading nodes. And I'm going to do it. How am I going to do this? How did I do it earlier? I think I'm going to duplicate this this entire network. Whoops. Whoops. Let's try that again. Select all these. Shift Control D. So I'm still using the same texture coordinates. And what I want to do here, I just want to get a different pattern, right? So let's look at the pattern, maybe increase. I'm going to actually decrease the scale so it's more broad black and white values. And then I'm going to change also the pattern down here. Let's maybe increase it. Decrease it. What do I like? What do I like? Change these values, I think, for sure. Ooh, that looks so cool. I'm telling you, if you have not played around with vector curves and noise, do yourself a favor and definitely do that. It's so much fun. You get wild effects. Yeah, that looks so nice. And it doesn't look procedural either. Like it is procedural, but it doesn't look like the uniformity that you usually get from a procedural. All right, so with this, I'm actually going to crush the levels, I think. Something like this, and then try and mix them. I didn't need to duplicate the bump. Converter or color mix RGB. And keep in mind, like a lot of this process, when I'm not rehearsed it for a teaching example, like it's a lot of just playing around. Okay, I'm going in and I have to discover the effect that I'm going for. I know how to play around with these nodes. I know it's going to involve these nodes, but I don't know all of it off the bat. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like learn to get comfortable with the experimentation. So right now I'm sort of halfway experimenting. I've done this before, but I forgot the exact steps. So I know that I want to mix these somehow, and I just need to figure out how exactly I want to mix them. Let's just try an overlay. Let's see what it looks like with the bump. I think I'm looking for some of these areas to be smoothed out or less intense. And so maybe, what if we clamp the values? That's going to be helpful, actually. If you use the clamp value, it can like limit the range from 0 to 1. That's what its purpose is. And so that can start to smooth out the effect. Okay, here we go. Look at this. I've started to smooth areas out, and now we've got completely, it looks almost like corroded metal, which I don't want, but like that's what I want to smooth those layers out a little bit better. So let's go to B-spline. Now we're getting better breakup. That's more what I'm talking about. Let's look elsewhere. Do I need it to be a mix? What about an add? Okay, and yeah, changing the operation actually does a lot. You can see what clamp does. But yeah, changing it to add did quite a bit. What about screen? So yeah, I'm really just playing around, and we get some deeper pits. You know, we get a variety of the breakup on the surface. So I think that's what I'm looking for. All right, let's do a render and see how different it is from the previous one. The secret ingredient, filmic. I don't think I'm actually using filmic. It is the default in 2.8, but if I look at color management, yeah, I've got it set to default where it's not set to filmic. So I don't know if it's since I think I opened this scene from a 2.79 version of Blender, and that's why it's not using filmic. I'm somewhere in the middle with filmic. I've used it enough now. I used to be pretty ignorant of it, but like I've used it enough now to where when it first came out, a lot of people shared renders that was like turn on filmic and all of a sudden your lighting values are like perfect. You're not getting any more blown out areas. It just looked like a perfect like color leveler, intensity leveler. And I remember it was very impressive. And then I turned it on, and all of a sudden my renders were not looking as good. And I think the reason for that is I got very used to non-photo or non. Wait, what? Did I hit escape? That's weird. I must have hit escape. Sorry, I don't know why my render stopped. But so anyway, Filmic to me, it's like, it's not the magic bullet like I thought it was, and I'm very happy often with the renders I get without Filmic. Sometimes Filmic, I'm used to the other way, and I really want blowout. For example, like the rim lighting effect. Now I can turn on Filmic, and we'll see what the difference is just for kicks. But in the past, I've experienced like areas that I really wanted to be blown out, like the rim light in this example. I want that to be really blown out, but Filmic kind of dials that back down. And so then I go back to the lights, and I'm like cranking them up super bright, and they almost never get as bright as I want. So anyway, like Filmic is, I see it as a tool, not a magic bullet, but I feel like a lot of people think of it as a magic bullet, and I'm not quite in that camp. If Filmic was there from the beginning, I think I would have always been used to that. But I don't know. I'm maybe sounding like an old dog that doesn't like new tricks, but I personally feel very misled. I feel a little misled by the renders that came out initially, because I'm now looking back, it's like, well, why did you render it so poorly in the first place? You know, why did you need to blow out those areas so much? You didn't have to, but you did. Anyway, so finally it's rendering pretty decently. I loved it, but in defense, I started using it within like a month of starting 3D. Yeah, so I mean, if you're coming into it at this point, if you're getting into 3D at this point, you might as well do Filmic, because I know that it's an improved color space. I know that, and it's worth starting on. I just don't think the old way is that bad. And I was surprised at how much, like when I used film, I don't need to keep talking about this. I'm just passing time while it renders. And I'm not sure why it's taking so much longer to render, frankly. But in passing the time, oh wow, it's after 4 already. Oh, I need to do the thing for Yukino. Okay, I'm gonna, if you don't want to stick around, you can leave, I suppose. But I do want to do a couple more things. Yeah. All right, let's look at this. Sorry, I'm jumping around. I think I've said enough about Filmic to kind of I don't need to keep beating that like a dead horse. So this is, let's check out the noise value, the difference between this and the previous version. So you can see that the variety is more noticeable, or the variety is more prevalent. Before, it was all super uniform and looked kind of CG, but now some areas have higher frequency of noise detail, some have less frequency. So it feels a little bit more realistic to have that variety, a little bit more tangible to have that variety. And it's just an extra layer of detail in the render, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. So I recommend employing this kind of technique on your model renders. Don't always just leave them perfectly smooth like this, but there's a lot of power in breaking up the surface. All right, finally, what I want to do for Yukino is, let's do another render featuring this character. Yeah, okay, Jake and Pavel, you guys are right that it's meant for more photorealism, and I've put Filmic in the same place that I put the Fresnel node. When I was talking about how Fresnel is, if you want physically accurate, trustworthy Fresnel, so that you don't have to do any artistic work, but you can just trust the science, then use the Fresnel node with an index of refraction. And that's how I see Filmic a little bit. If you want to trust the software that it's scientifically proven better than the old color space, then then use that. And that's great, and I will certainly use it. I'm not saying I won't use Filmic. Once I start creating scenes in Blender 2.8, I think at that point I would have to intentionally turn Filmic off, and I think I'll do that less. But I also like the artistic ability to choose Filmic or not. All right, I don't want to talk anymore about Filmic. Sorry, I feel like I'm being overly critical when I don't have my foot strongly for or against. Pop quiz. What is the pop quiz? Oh, I don't have a pop quiz. Ah, nuts. I don't have a pop quiz for you guys. I did want to show for Yukino. So I think the note that Yukino is talking about is I think Yukino is a she too, but is a female. But the note that I gave Yukino was the scratches and grime I think she was doing on her vehicle was kind of universal. Or maybe it was maybe not the vehicle, but the toy truck. And I wanted to show like how is the same idea, basically like don't have the pattern be universal over the entire surface, but try and concentrate it. And with her, I think I told her that I apologize if you're not a she at this point, but I told her that you could use the pointiness node to kind of isolate grime and dust to the corners and things like that. So we actually now have ambient occlusion and we have pointiness, input pointiness. Where is it? Oh, geometry, I think. Yeah. So we have both of these. Ambient occlusion is going to be perfect for converter. Color ramp is going to be perfect for isolating just the crevices. All right, so you can use the ambient occlusion as a white and black node. You can adjust it how you want, but this isolates, it provides a white and black map with which to put your grime, okay? So you could, let's say, add a color mix RGB node into if you put that in the factor, you can say color 1 is your, this is kind of weird, but like color 1 is going to be your black value. That's going to be your dirt and your grime. So let's make that like a brown color. All right. And then this other color is like your car paint. I know that's really super weird, but that's how you can use that factor. And similarly, you can use the pointiness node or the pointiness input right here from the geometry node. And this gets you both like crevices, but also crevices in a different way, but also your ridges in the model, right? So as I crank on these values a little bit more, you know, on the ridges, it's a white color, and then in the crevices, it's a dark color. So you can use these similarly. You know, and I've got that dirt isolated to the crevices. That's what I was talking about, Yukino, with how to isolate your wear and tear details. So sorry I made you watch the entire stream if that's all you wanted to learn about, but that's kind of how I go about doing that. And then you can plug that into the color. And so, I mean, I can kind of switch this around to be, rather than these weird blue and brown colors, you can make it like a corroded metal. You know, if I go to like a greenish and then like a brownish gold, you can start to get a corroded metal look. Pretty cool. All right. If you invert that AO node, you get the outer edges. That's true too. Yeah, that's a great point. Ambient occlusion, if you, let's do this. Yeah, I was asking for this back in like 2012 because V-Ray had an ambient occlusion utility, you know, however their shader system is. I forgot what it's called, but they had the ability to use ambient occlusion as a factor, and I use that thing all the time for dirt and dust. It's super powerful. But if we invert, and let's see. Wait, is that not what you meant? Oh, no, no, no. I know what you mean. Sorry. It's not, whoops, it's not invert. It's the opposite. It's the inside. All right, let's try this again. The inside version is actually really powerful because you can isolate the edges. No, not the edges. What am I trying to say? The opposite of the crevices. It's not quite the ridges, but it's yeah, like I'm isolating the shoulders here, for example, like these prominent protrusions. Oh, it's kind of like a thickness. That's what it is. It isolates thickness in a way. Anyway, that's kind of a side note. Cool. Well, that's all I had planned. I took you 10 minutes over. I actually think it's kind of cool that we ended up with this like sort of corroded or not corroded, tarnished statue? Is that what you call it? Let's see what that looks like. Yeah. What is that called? Tarnished maybe, but I think you know what I'm talking about. This is, you know, the statues that have been outside, copper statues that have been outside and in the rain and weather and stuff. All right, I'm just babbling on at this point. Thank you guys for coming. I hope that hope you learned a bit about character. That's like all I have to teach you about character lighting. That's my big master's thesis. You know, thesis, not master. Eliminate the master part, but thesis on character lighting. I hope that was valuable, and I will see you in the forum threads. Really look forward to seeing what you do this week, and I will finish up the homework in the next day or two, like finish grading week 2, so that you know what you got, gave you some more critiques, and I will see you around. All right, let's make these last couple weeks profound. All right, let's just do incredible work. All right, I look forward to seeing the forums. Second time I said that. Goodbye.